Welcome to the Strong Youth Project, where our mission is to improve organized sport experiences for youth, parents, coaches, and other mentors via education and evidence-based practice.
Welcome back to the Strong Youth Project podcast. My name is Kylie Haycock. I'm an undergrad student in human development here at BYU, and I am here with Dr. Sarah Coyne and Chenae Duerden. We're excited to have them today and learn a little bit about how human development plays into the aspects of sports. So Dr. Sarah Coyne is a professor of human development in the School of Family Life at Brigham Young University. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from Utah State University and her PhD in psychology from the University of Central Lancashire. Is that how you say that?
Lancashire.
In Preston, England. Her research interests involve media, aggression, gender, mental health, and child development. Dr. Coyne has over 200 publications on these and other topics. She regularly speaks to families and teenagers about using media in positive ways. She has 5 younger children and currently lives in Salem, Utah. And as for Chenae, she's currently a PhD student for Sarah at Brigham Young University, studying marriage, family, and human development, which is what she did her master's in also at BYU. Her research interest is specifically women's studies, though her master's thesis looked at gender discrimination in sports. She has 4 children and currently lives in Provo, Utah. So we're excited to have you guys here today. We just want to start off with a general question of how on earth does your research apply to sports? What can these listeners in this audience use in their teams?
Well, yeah. Do you want to go with Chenae or do you want me to go?
This is like one of the reasons why I came back to school a few years ago is I was really interested in, I've always loved sports. I still love playing sports, and I just was really interested in, especially girls' experiences in sports. So that's what brought me to school and what I ended up doing my thesis in, but that's awesome. Part of my interest.
Yeah, and I didn't start out with sports. I was really, really bad at sports. Like, I was the kid in the, they stuck in right field because they didn't want the ball to ever come. That was like me. I study body image and self-esteem and mental health, which can apply to a lot of different fields. But I have a lot of kids that are athletes themselves. And so I'm getting much more interested in how those things apply to athletes, especially who are our youth.
That's super awesome. And I know for me, I played lots of sports in high school, and I still am pretty athletic. And I have watched this change my life. Like, I went from a super shy person to now I'm on this podcast. Just kidding. It's a good, right? Good comparison, I guess. Yeah. So I'm interested to see how your research specifically applies to these athletes and what they can do to better their self-esteem, better their body image, and how teams can help improve sex discrimination in their teams. So, Sarah, we're going to start with you. And Chenae, feel free to chime in whenever you want to. But let's focus on self-esteem for a little bit here. Yeah. How is sports good for self-esteem, and why would you say that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sports can be very, very good for self-esteem. So self-esteem is just defined by the way you think about who you are as a person. Sports can promote self-esteem because you're achieving and you're getting better and you're part of a team and you belong and you can feel good about yourself. So in general, playing sports as a youth can be great for self-esteem. But, right, it can have a dark side depending on the team, depending on the coach, depending on the environment. If you have a coach that's always putting kids down, and is so performance-focused and just insulting kids, yelling at kids, screaming at kids, self-esteem can deteriorate pretty rapidly. And so there's a myth that sports builds self-esteem and builds character, but it's only built when it's intentionally built. So that's kind of what I'd say about that.
Perfect. And what advice would you give to specifically coaches and parents who can see that their team may be struggling with self-esteem or struggling with that? What would you say to them?
Yeah. I take a careful look at what's my motivation for coaching. Is it to win? Right? And a lot of coaches, that's what it is. It's hey, I want the win vicariously. That's what I want to do. Winning's great. Who doesn't love to win, right? But coaching what it should be is all about building kids up, building character, right? And so take a look at intentions, and then just think about the way that you're talking to them. So we know from a long, long history of psychological research that positive reinforcement, where we're praising kids for good behavior, for doing positive things, works so much more better than punishment, which would be like screaming at a kid, right? It's more motivating. The team is going to do better, and you're going to build some good self-esteem right there.
I think that's a super awesome answer. So overall, we want to focus on not the performative aspect, on a group basis, focusing on how each individual is like rewarding them on their efforts.
Yeah, exactly.
They're trying, and that their successes are successes for them.
Yeah, and it's like what are you trying to build, right? So what do you want this youth to be? You know, when I think about my kids, why are they in sports? Because they learn perseverance, right? They learn to not give up when it's hard. They learn how to be on a team. They learn how to support each other. They learn how to be compassionate when somebody gets hurt. They learn work ethic. They learn how to work really, really hard, you know? So those are the things that I care so much more about than winning, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think for me in my high school sports, that's what helped me win the most.
Exactly.
Yeah, I felt better about myself. I was able to succeed more when that happened. And it may not be the case for everyone, right? But it's the hope that, that can happen. Yeah, I love that.
Sorry, can I just also with parents, as far as what parents can do, I feel like there's always a temptation to really specialize and focus. And I know there's been other podcasts that have talked about this specifically, but I think for a lot of kids don't always benefit from like specializing, right? So just recognizing that there's lots of options out there for kids' sports. And even getting into high school, we kind of have this myth in our mind that if our kid doesn't start when they're 3 with a certain like sport, that things won't go well for them. But even in high school, there's so many opportunities for kids to be able to participate in sports without even trying out. There's like cross country or mountain biking or ultimate frisbee, or there's so many clubs and things like that I just think that we kind of have in our head that there's not going to be opportunities ahead of them if they aren't super focused, but it's not always good for kids. And most kids, I think, range is better than the specialization. So as parents, we can kind of recognize that there's lots of options and we can explore and try things out.
That's awesome. And what if they are bad, right?
Like,
what do you guys do? Yeah. What do you do if you're bad and you're in a sport? Like, how would you encourage you as a parent? Like, how would you encourage your kid to keep up their self-esteem, but try to improve them? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We're doing this right now. So my 7-year-old was in soccer. His name is Finn. Bless him. I have other like soccer players in my family that are so good. Finn will like not move unless the ball hits him in the foot. And even then he kind of looks at it and I'm like, dude, what is happening? So I could get really angry and like, I paid all this money and why are you in here? And run. You know, like you hear parents like screaming from the sidelines to do something. But it's like, did you have fun, Finn? It's like, yeah, it's a win. That's great. Okay. Awesome. You know, what did you like about it? I like being outside. That's great. Let's focus on that, right? And like the love of the sport will come, maybe. And if it doesn't, we'll try something else. And in fact, we're done with soccer. We're on to art with him.
That's awesome.
And it's okay. And it's all fine.
Yeah. No, I love that point, Chenae, and I thank you for adding that story because specification isn't always the right answer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And moving on, we're going to hop into Chenae's professional field here about discrimination. So tell us about it. How did you see it in sport? What is it?
I think I got interested in it just because I just recognized the experiences I had, especially when I was younger, often would kind of put me in this place because of my gender that I was less than. That's it. At least that's how I felt. And so I was really interested in exploring this more and just seeing, was this just my experience or maybe a friend's experience, or is this kind of a general experience that people are having? And I will say, like, before getting into discrimination in sports, I think that it's like such an exciting time in women's sports and girls and women's sports. I feel like there's never been a better time, I think, to be like an athlete and a female athlete. So there's so many fun things happening. We've made so many strides in this area, but there's still, I think, a lot of work to do. And anyways, so yeah, what part of this do we want to talk about?
Specifically, let's talk about the differences that we see between boys and girls in sports.
Okay.
How they're treated, the frequency, timing, length of participation.
Yeah.
Like that.
Okay. So there's things that we do know about this. So data suggests that girls participate less than boys in sports, and that by the age of 14, that girls are dropping out of sports at twice the rate of the boys. And so there's probably not one single explanation for this. There's probably a lot of things going on. The Women's Sports Foundation, they said that some of the reasons for this could be lack of opportunity, social stigma, decrease in quality of experience, cost. But there's other studies too that will talk about puberty. So around this age, I think boys are starting to we're all developing. Boys will develop more testosterone, which gives them an advantage in sports. Girls will start their periods, which can affect what they're willing to do and how they feel. And then even just with puberty, I think there's this body consciousness that we'll talk a little bit more about. Just this awareness that bodies are changing. How willing am I to, run or wear these uniforms or whatever? And it can just be a different experience for boys and girls. So those are some of the statistics we have on that.
Can I share an example? Mm-hmm. So when I was in the 9th grade, I was on the swim team, and I was not great, but I was okay, right? But I was kind of a late bloomer, and I'd got my period that year, and I had never used a tampon. Yeah. And so I'm like, how do I do this sport? I don't understand, right? And I was so stressed out and so nervous, and so eventually dropped the sport.
Yeah.
And that was one reason of many. But until you said that, I didn't put the two together about why did I quit swimming? I used to like it a lot. But those two things kind of fit together then.
Yeah, I think it happens more than we think. And we don't always think about it because it's just something that's happening all the time, right?
Exactly.
But these are changing bodies. I think girls will just have those experiences where it just doesn't feel worth it. Yeah, this experience, how do I do this? Well, I guess I can't do it anymore. Or my body's different. I don't like the way I feel in a swimsuit. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to do this anymore.
And
yes, and there's just the motivation drops for, I think, a lot of girls, depending on the sport. It's, various reasons, but yeah. It's a good,
and super
example.
interesting. We can hop right into body image with that actually specifically. So I was also a swimmer. Yeah. And I loved it, but I got a little ridicule from my family. They're all runners. And my body was different. So I had a bigger build because swimmers, their shoulders get broader as you swim more. And I swam my whole life. And so how do we deal with that? How do we help these swimmers and these athletes, these female athletes who have different bodies and things like that, be okay with it? How does body image play into sport?
Yeah, that's great questions. So first of all, engaging in sports tends to be protective for body image, right? So it can be a really wonderful thing, right? You're connecting with your body. You're focusing more on what your body can do as opposed to what your body looks like. That's a huge part of sports. I remember my daughter, Hannah, coming to me when she was really young, and she said, so-and-so at school said I have big thighs. And I was like, dude, you have the best thighs because you're a gymnast and because they help you spring off the floor and they help you run. And I just kind of turned it on its head, and she's like, that's right. I do have great thighs, right? So first of all, I wanted to say it can be very, very protective. Where we see the problems is in aesthetic sports tend to have worse body image than non-aesthetic sports. And what I mean by that is it is a lot about the way you look. So dancing is a big one. Cheerleading is another, and gymnastics and figure skating, I think, are the highest in terms of body image problems for girls specifically. And then wrestling for both boys and girls haven't been studied that much, although we're working on that in our lab, which is a weight-based sport. And so body image is not something I think a lot of coaches think about. And so my advice to certainly coaches and parents is to include this in some of your discussions. A lot of time we talk about nutrition, right? And make sure you're fueling your body. But man, I would love it if the cheerleading team had a frank discussion about body image. What does that feel like for you? Everyone's kind of judging you on your appearance a lot of the time. Can we have open conversations about, is that a thing? Why is it? How can we have a team culture where we talk about these things and it's not appearance focused? I would love for that to be a significant change in youth sports.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And it'd be interesting to see what that would look like. Yeah. Speaking to the athletes specifically, who may listen to this, what do you say if they're struggling with body image or self-esteem? How can they help create a better culture in their own team too?
Oh man, what a good question. Shane, do you want to do it, or do you want me?
Well, I can start, and then I think just this idea that Sarah's talking about it, just like talking about it, right? Like taking it out from underneath the rug and just talking about how sports, or how this makes you feel, right? Or when you wear certain things, how does it make you feel? I think just bringing it out in the open can be really empowering for girls and boys. I think just to be able to say, Sarah was talking about aesthetic sports and non-aesthetic sports. And there's also this idea of lean and non-lean sports. So any of the sport that you're kind of trying to be lean or non-lean would be sometimes sports where boys and girls experience this need to be a certain weight or build, and it can be a lot of pressure on them. So I think just having language for it, be able to talk about it, is really powerful.
Yeah, that normalizes it, right? I would also, for anyone who's listening, so validate it. You are not alone. Most teenagers are struggling with their body image. Most people are struggling with their body image. I've studied this for 20 years, and I haven't yet met anyone who's like, I have never had a problem with the way that my body looks. Or like, it's such a journey for everyone. So first of all, you're not alone. It's a pretty normal thing that you're going through. The second thing is I would give you the same advice as I gave to my daughter so many years ago is focus on what your body can do instead of what it looks like. And I know society's going to tell you that it's all about what you look like, but that's why sports is so amazing. It's because look at the amazing things your body can do. It can run or jump or swim or dance or leap or whatever that is. And when we focus on what our bodies can do instead of what they look like, we have lower levels of what we call objectification, which is where we view our bodies as an object. And that's what we're trying to diminish. So just be really aware of those thoughts. And when they come up, sit with it for a minute and think about all the amazing things that you do as an athlete.
Yeah, thank you both. I think that everything that you've shared today is useful for parents, coaches, and adolescents. And these three topics are something super current, right? It's something women's sports, like you were saying, Chenae, we've seen improvements like crazy, but we need to continue to change them, to improve what we're teaching our athletes. So thank you for sharing. Anything else you would add to this podcast? Anything else you want to share with the viewers about self-esteem, body image, or sex discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched a little bit on, differences between girls' and boys' experiences in sports. But I think as far as discrimination goes, I mean, when we define discrimination, it would be prejudice treatment towards a group, right? So, and there's not ever like good outcomes that comes from this. So like, for example, girls that feel like they've experienced discrimination, they'll often experience this poor body image or body esteem. They will experience teasing and stereotypes. And so I think a little bit more just kind of about the discriminatory issue, I feel like, with sports. I think most of the time, I think discrimination is, I like to believe that most of the time discrimination is not malicious. I think that it's just kind of something that we put up with, these differences of experiences that people have, this awareness that girls experience, especially more body esteem issues, but sometimes we're just okay with that. We just kind of say that's how it is. But there's so many things that we can do. I just think, for me, I think it's really helpful to be curious and aware that I think the experiences that youth have, especially the way that I see things, like the female and male experience, the sports experience, like in high school, can be like really different. So I have a couple of examples of that I could share.
Yeah,
but
for sure. No, I would love it. And especially with trying to retain more girls in sports, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. So here's like a recent example. I have a fun teenage friend that I was going to see her play lacrosse this last season. And I walk into the field where they're playing, which is where the stadium is. And, there's like fencing all along the way. And there's these like life-size pictures of the boys lacrosse team. And I was like, this is like so interesting. Where's like the other posters? And I'm kind of like looking around, and there's no other posters for anybody else. And I was just like, I'm here at this girls lacrosse team, and there's these life-size posters of the boys lacrosse team, which is great and fun for them. I'm sure that was very exciting for somebody to put together and for them to see themselves. But it's just like something that I was like, this is weird that we are like it's like a silly example, but also that's like the experience of girls sports. Like that's, if you were kind of like curious enough to just pay attention to those things, like it is continuously the experience for girls in athletics to feel like they're not as important or not as valued and not seen. Another like experience that I recently had was my daughter played softball this last summer, which is her first season. And they just put a ton of money into these big like baseball fields here. And they've got all the boys playing baseball over there. And then there's kind of the sandlot field for the girls. And I kind of liked it because it was closer to my house. And but I know there was even one of the coaches was like, hey, can we put some resources into this? I actually have the ability to put some in to like make this nicer. And nobody cared about it. And I knew there were less girls playing softball, but I'm always kind of like, but why are there less girls playing softball? Like, couldn't we just kind of move some of the games over there? They have lights so we could play all night long, but like, could we make, like, realize that we don't always, we're not placing enough value in both boys and girls sports. So anyways, those are just some things that I think are really interesting. And again, like, I don't think it's malicious. I think it's just like this kind of vicious cycle that we're in sometimes with sports and gender, that we think the thing to say is kind of like, well, people don't like to watch girls sports or whatever, but or women's sports, but then people aren't as interested. And anyways, yeah, I just think there's a lot.
Kind of what you're saying is it's like a systemic and cultural problem.
Yeah.
That, if anyone's listening, if you're an administrator or a coach or a parent, speak up. I think a lot of this is the type of language that we use as well. So I still hear, on the football team when the coach yells at the football players, like, you throw like a girl or stop acting like a girl. And like,
interesting.
What does that tell us about girls? About girl
What are our attitudes? I think there's just like these ingrained attitudes. So again, we just kind of, I don't think it's malicious. We've just put up with it for so long, but it's always this message that girls hear that and they recognize that they are second class. I think, and this is, sports is a really interesting domain because it's one of the last places where we are segregated by gender for the most part. And so I think it's a really interesting place to kind of look at those differences. And again, like biologically, yes, there's differences, right? There's, again, I talked about testosterone earlier, like there's things that give boys an advantage, but there's strengths that girls have in sports, especially varied sports. And the gap is, I think, closing in a lot of ways, but I think it's social attitudes that are really the thing that hold us back. And I think like as a parent, for example, what are you talking about at the dinner table? Like what sports are you talking about? It's usually like, at least in the dinner tables I'm at, it's like men's football team or the men's basketball team. And when we're not like giving any attention or even excitement towards some of these other up and coming teams, I think it just sends a message about who's important here. So
awareness, awareness of all the athletes, no matter their gender, no matter their situation. Inclusiveness is the general theme that I'm getting from you both. Inclusiveness in body image and self-esteem in athletes, to help them know that they're included and that they're welcome and happy to belong. We thank you for being here today as the Strong Youth Project, and we're excited to keep learning more in this field about development and athletes. Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
appreciate it.